Hi guys, welcome back. We may finish the Lost Bookshop today. If you hear noises in the background, all my kids are here, my dad's here. I can try all day long to have it quiet but let's begin. We left off on chapter 51, page 365, Henry. We lay in Martha's single bed, every inch of our skin touching. The wall between us had crumbled with every heart-sore word she spoke in the kitchen, like an exorcism of the past. The truth shall set you free. That's what they say. We were both laid bare now, and I knew then and there that she was my destiny. Every stupid, seemingly pointless, difficult, lonely, challenging thing I had done in my life before this had led me here, to Hot Penny Lane. Are you okay? I felt her head nodding against my chest, and I pulled her even closer into me. My heart felt 10 times its usual size. I felt like I could lift a car if I needed to. Probably best not to try, but the feeling was there nonetheless. There's something I never told you, I said. Oh God, you're not engaged to someone else, are you? Very funny. I'll engage you in a minute if you're not careful. If you're not careful, I might say yes. Did we just get married? She laughed a little hoarsely directly into my ear, which was ridiculously sexy. I might give the whole marriage thing a miss for a while. I think if that's okay. Same. She rested her chin on my chest, waiting for the thing I'd never told her. Here went nothing. I've been in the bookshop. What bookshop? The bookshop. Next door. She shook her head slightly, trying to make sense of my words. It exists, Martha, or at least it did for a time, the night I arrived in Ireland. You've seen it? I nodded. Why didn't you tell me? I pulled my why do you think face. You already thought I was a weirdo. That's not true, she said, laughing again. I thought you were a perv. Well, there you are. I didn't want to be a perv and a weirdo. Might have blown my chances with you altogether. Are you saying you fancied me right from the start? Fishing for compliments? She rolled over and pretended she was going to get up. I hauled her back until she was lying on top of me, and I felt a desire for her aching through my body. I think I knew from the minute I saw you. She kissed me softly and let her fingers run through my hair. It was like a dream I never wanted to wake from. After all of the times I've had to leave the house knowing she would never be mine, it hardly seemed real. Wait a second, she said, lifting herself up on her elbows and annoyingly removing her lips from mine. Why do you think the shop chose you to see it? I'm not sure it chose me. It was hard to think rationally while lying naked in bed with this woman. Besides, for the longest time, I thought it was a drunken mirage, if such a thing existed. She sat up now and wrapped the sheet around her. It seemed we were taking a break. The book, A Place Called Lost. I just assumed Madame Bound had put it in here. Along with your tree? She made a face at me. My sarcastic tone was wearing thin. I told you, none of it makes sense. This might sound crazy. Crazier than seeing a shop that doesn't exist? She looked at me with her head tilted as though sizing me up. The manuscript, it's really important to you, isn't it? Was she still doubting my motivation here? I began to explain myself, but she interrupted. No, I know that's not what this is, but I get that you wanted to prove something. Hearing those words, it all suddenly sounded so superficial. Trying to win the approval of other people, chasing achievements that weren't really achievements at all. It's not as if I wrote anything. I just stumbled across someone else's work and tried to find my own worth in some kind of secondhand glory. Maybe I had it all wrong. Maybe it was time I tried to earn my own respect instead of everybody else's. Finding the manuscript would have been, I paused, searching for the right word, immense. But in a strange way, uncovering the truth about Opaline and her bookshop, and, last but not least, meeting the perfect partner with the kind of laugh that makes my heart race, has sort of surpassed that. Are we partners? I'd like to be. Okay, with that, she turned her back to me. What are we doing? Is this some kind of mating ritual? Do I turn my back? She was laughing again. The words, Henry. Her tattoo, of course. I leaned closer but couldn't make out the writing. Shit! What is it? I think I might need glasses. She bent towards her nightstand and fished out a magnifying glass from the drawer. I tried not to feel like Like an aging tortoise, the script began. Renville Hall is a specter that haunts us all from one generation to the next, crushing every dream, every aspiration in its path. This ground is cursed, as the lineage of each and every child born here. I am born into darkness, and no amount of atonement will grant me the saving light I have sought in her, my darling Rosaline. Darkness will reign on this place until my last breath and beyond. I wasn't sure what I expected since seeing Martha's tattoo the first time, but I know I had not expected this. Can you see the date? I searched with my magnifying glass and saw the numbers, 1846. What is this? She turned around to look at me, her eyes wide and solemn. I've never told anyone about this. I never really understood it. I mean, why it was happening until I saw that photograph of Opaline. She reached back and grabbed her phone off the nightstand, pulling up an image of an old photograph we'd found of Opaline at St. Agnes's before handing it to me. What am I looking for? I asked, taking the phone. Look at her skirt. I zoomed in and saw something I had missed before. There were stitches on the material. Words, she said, prompting my brain to kick into gear. A story, the same one that's on my skin. She sewed it into her clothes. What the? I looked at her back again and saw the initials at the end. EJB. My scalp tingled and it felt like my hair was standing on end. Henry. I think this is Emily Bronte's manuscript. Wow. Chapter 52, Opaline, London, 1946. Inspired by the Count of Monte Cristo, I spent months searching for information and came across a newspaper article about a soldier's family who believed he had been wrongly executed for cowardice. They named the unit. It was my brother's. I had my lead. All I had to do was follow it. I uncovered damning court-martial papers from 2 trials held in Ypres, where 50 men had been sentenced to death by firing squad, or murdered, depending on your viewpoint, just days before the armistice was signed, and in full knowledge that the Germans were about to surrender. My brother had ordered 2 more men to be shot. I took the papers to a Mr. Turner, a journalist working with the Times, and he agreed to investigate further. From the trial record, it was clear that they were suffering from shell shock. In Lyndon's own hand, he wrote that shell shock was a regrettable weakness not found in good units. There is insufficient evidence for a conviction, he'd written, yet he recommended a death sentence in order to send a message to the battalion, who had suffered great losses the day before. There was no mention that it was a general's military strategy that had led to these wasted lives. One was an Irish soldier, Frank O'Dowd, who was shot for refusing to put his hat on because it was wet through from the endless rain. He was drugged by a doctor to get him through the final hours in the death cells. Mr. Turner had been able to contact the medic, who confirmed that O'Dowd was a volunteer soldier. They couldn't see brave men when they were standing there in front of them, the medic had told them. He also confirmed that, once the firing squad had finished, my brother gave the Irishman the final coup de grace, a bullet to the head. I spent the night at the Great Western Royal Hotel in Paddington. Unlike so much of London, it had made it through the war, relatively unscathed, with some minor air raid damage to the roof. It was strange being back home. I no longer felt a part of the fabric, and the people seemed strange to me, different somehow. The war had robbed them of so much. In that, I should have felt a kind of solidarity, but my war had been a very different one. I met with Mr. Turner for lunch, and he handed me a copy of the article they would print in the paper the following day. I read the article. It was powerful. Turner was an exceptional journalist, and rather than making a pantomime villain out of my brother, or a monster capable of terrible evil, he presented him as a very real man who had chosen brutality over human decency. This somehow made him more real, more accountable for his crimes. No going back now, he said, tipping his hat to me before disappearing into the crowd on the street. There is an old saying, before you set out on a journey of revenge, you must dig 2 graves, said a woman's voice, deepened by time and wisdom, yet unmistakably that of my old friend Jane. Jane, I cried, embracing her tightly. I had written and asked if she would meet me in the hotel lobby. Confucius said that, she warned, fearing the endeavor would somehow destroy me too. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I need to own my story, to take back my power. I realize now that I shared another commonality with the families of those dead soldiers. I was shamed into silence. Ashamed of what happened to me, of how I had somehow let it happen to me, and how people would look on me now as some sort of damaged woman. I felt tainted by it. Other than Joseph's quiet and humble company, I had isolated myself from the world because of it. Was I ready to return? Maybe not, but then, does one ever feel truly ready? All I knew was that in that moment I had suffered enough in my silence. At least the pain of speaking out might bring me courage. The world needs to know who Lyndon Carlisle really is. I offered up my own story. Commanding Officer Carlisle, the Reaper, had his own sister locked up in an asylum for the insane. Good grief, will your editor print it? Jane asked. It's something of an old boys network at the Times. What Lyndon did to me doesn't count, apparently. That's absurd. Mr. Turner was of the view that any hint of mental weakness could tarnish my reputation and detract from the real story. His words. Perhaps he has a point, Jane mused, chewing her lip. Lyndon might use it to his advantage. I suppose you're right. One last sacrifice to see justice done. I had set events in motion now. There was no turning back. Was I scared? Of course I was, yet the story had now become so much bigger than me. I felt responsible to act on behalf of all those who would never have the opportunity to get justice for what my brother did to them. I would restore some integrity to the Carlisle name. I felt it was what my father would have wanted also. The time had come. I had to confront him face to face. As the evening grew dark, I made my way to erstwhile family home. The air was still and quiet, my footsteps on the pavement the only sound, save for the blood pounding in my ears. I came to the front gate of the house. How much smaller everything looked. I knocked on the door, and in the moments while I waited, I tried to imagine myself at a very tall, strong-rooted tree. I let the muscles in my shoulders release and focused all my energy into the center of my belly. That's where the fire burned, and I knew it would need to draw on it now, with precision and fierceness, a woman answered. Mr. Carlisle, I said plainly, is he expecting you? If he is not, then he is a fool. The woman looked puzzled, then went to deliver the message. I didn't wait for an invitation into my own home. I closed the door behind me and followed her across the parquet hall to the parlor. Excuse me, madam, you must wait here. I've waited long enough, I said, pushing past her with ease. He was having his supper at the table and almost choked on his soup when he saw me. What the devil? Surprised to see me, brother? He didn't speak another word. He hated being seen, to be at a disadvantage. He would wait to see the lie of the land before planning his counterattack. I was not prepared for how much older he would look, older than his years. He had become frail, his skin papery and thin and frightfully red around his scars. His hands were arthritic, curling into themselves, and he was practically bald. You're wondering why I am here and not in my cell at St. Agnes's? He patted the corner of my mouth with the napkin and placed it on the table. The woman who had answered the door still hovered around me like a fly in summer until he waved her away. How did she do it? You must be thinking to yourself, and what of Dr. Lynch? He still takes your money every month, does he not? He narrowed his eyes and stood up from the table. For all his weaknesses, he could still command himself like an officer. It took all of my will not to step back. How dare you show your face here? I could almost feel his breath on my skin. He stood so close to me. I am not afraid of you anymore. What more could you do to me? Shall we find out? I held his gaze. I wanted to strike out, but I had something greater than violence in my armory. You wanted to erase me? That little girl, father's favorite? Well, allow me to congratulate you. That girl no longer exists. The woman that stands before you now is a very different creature, one who is also bent on destruction, namely yours. Am I to be moved by this spectacle? Because I assure you, I am not. I paced around him like a lioness around her prey. Within hours, the whole world will know what you have done. The ink is soaking into the paper as we speak. What paper? What are you talking about, woman? The Times. They were very interested in your past, especially your nickname, the Reaper. I saw a flicker of concern. Paper will take any ink, regardless of its veracity, and you will only reveal yourself as a dim-witted fool who belongs in a sanatorium. Ah, yes, you have me there. Unjust as it is, I knew my story alone wouldn't be enough to ruin your reputation. Tarnish it, perhaps, but not annihilation. Not the annihilation I seek. No, Lyndon, the morning papers will be full of your crimes on the battlefield and those men you murdered under the guise of cowardice. Most of the records were destroyed, but I have gathered enough evidence of your despicable acts to make you a pariah in the eyes of everyone you know and an enemy to everyone else. His eyes widened momentarily. Those pitiful excuses for men did not deserve to wear the uniform. They were a disgrace to their families, to their country. I have proof that the men you shot were not deserters, witnesses who are prepared to go on record that you murdered those men. Their families deserve justice. I gave them justice. His voice boomed like a cannon from his ribcage. It's just as I suspected. You are truly mad. We were all just pieces on a chessboard to him, inconsequential pieces to be moved about at his will. Well, it takes one to know one. Besides, they were conscripts, not real soldiers. I knew he was baiting me. Some of them were just boys. Did you know that? So yes, perhaps they panicked in the face of all that death, but they were not deserters. Oh, please, Opaline, do tell us more about your experience of life on the battlefield. Enlighten me with your knowledge of such matters. I know that is not my right to be judge and juror over someone else's life. Shall I tell you of the thousands that died of exposure that winter? Still more from cholera. The indescribable suffering of millions of the Empire's best men lying in those mud trenches for weeks, in rain, cold, wind, hungry and weary under the constant rain of the enemy's bullets. The terrible booming and slaughter that carried on ceaselessly. The dead and wounded cleared away for new soldiers to face an enemy better armed and better prepared. Showers of black mud raining down on the wild primitive countryside. 20,000 men were killed on the first day at the Somme. It was as if the last day had come, and every man had to face it with only the comrade at his side for support. In the trenches they ate when food could reach them, starved when it could not. There they killed and were buried in shallow graves, half-eaten by rats. And they were the lucky ones. I hadn't expected this. He had never spoken about the war before now, and if he had, perhaps things that could have been different. Still, it doesn't excuse. None of us could escape the horror of it. We had to defend king and country, so I did what I had to do. What, killing your own soldiers before the enemy could? By making an example of their cowardice. Armies are ruled by fear. Do you think those men that volunteered understood the carnage that lay ahead of them? Don't you think that every man out there wished with every fiber of their being that they could leave that hellish place? What do you think keeps men marching forward to their death? I didn't know. Duty, honor. Those weasels that you now seem so bent on protecting had neither of those things. They were out and out cowards. If you truly believe in honor, then you will know somewhere in your heart, or if you do not possess one, which I doubt you do, then in your conscience that you were wrong. The families of those men have carried this shame for too long, and for what? Even if those men felt fear in the face of a formidable enemy, is it a crime punishable by death? You could have pardoned them. Most commanding officers did, but not you. Why must you crush anyone who does not meet your exacting standards? Why must you humiliate and torment? Enough. He walked away from me and poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter. I tried to steady myself, although my legs were shaking, and I longed for a drink also. It's always your pain, your suffering. You never think about anyone else. I didn't even bother replying. There is little point. Can't you imagine for a moment the suffering I have endured from this? He pointed to the side of his body that was burned. He took various bottles of pills from his pockets and threw them on the table. They barely touched the surface, he said calmly now. I did my duty out there. I put my body on the line, and what did I get in return? They gave you medals, didn't they? Ha, medals. I wanted respect. I wanted a future, a family. No woman would ever come near me when she saw this. I could no longer provide a wife with children in any case. A useless specimen. I had to beg for a job. Do you know how humiliating that was? The one thing I ask you to do. Marry Bingley? I asked. And there you were, flaunting your freedom in front of me, the freedom I paid for. Lyndon, if only you had spoken on this before, I could have helped. What could you have done? You were only good for one thing, and you wouldn't even obey me in that. Obey you? I almost laughed at the thought. What right did he have? He always acted like he had authority over me, and I suppose our age difference normalized his behavior. Not anymore. You make it sound as though I owe you something, and believe me, brother, I owe you nothing. You owe me everything. You would be dead if it weren't for me. What on earth are you talking about? Your mother wouldn't keep you. To this day, I still can't be certain you're even mine, French slut. It was as though I had wandered into someone else's conversation. His words didn't make any sense to me. My mother? He walked to the sideboard, picked out a cigar from a silver box, and lit it with a round marble lighter. His eyes narrowed as he sucked and eventually blew smoke into the still air. You may as well now, mother and father are both dead. Your grandparents. I shook my head. None of this sounded right. I'm not going to listen to this madness, I said, turning to leave. Not so keen on the truth now, eh? I stopped dead. I thought you were here to set the record straight, to bring all of my past transgressions into the light. Well, you may as well know all of it then. I felt nauseated. There was a sickening feeling creeping up my veins and into my chest. I realized I knew what he was going to say, but somehow always known somewhere deep inside of me, but never allowed myself to see it. And when that cheap rag of a newspaper prints your version of events tomorrow, you will know that you have betrayed your own father. I turned around and looked him dead in the eyes. No, I said, shaking my head again. You can't be. We were touring Europe the summer of 1900. My grandmother, your great-grandmother, paid for the trip. I was with some friends from university doing the grand tour, as was the custom for a young man. I was 20 years of age, much like yourself, when you made your own escape on the continent. I hated that he was comparing us. I was nothing like him. We were visiting the French Riviera. She made herself available to me. Shut up! I covered my ears with my hands. It was too much. But he came towards me and pulled my arms down by my side. It's the natural order of things, Opaling. Young men must sow their wild oats. But girls like her, they know an opportunity when they see it. Before I left, she came to me saying that she was pregnant and couldn't afford a child. I told her she would get nothing from me, but she had my name and must have found our address. A year later, she showed up at our door and left you like an unwanted gift on the doorstep. I was crying, but he kept on. I suggested an orphanage, but father, being the weak-willed man that he was, insisted on keeping you. I wanted nothing to do with it. I had my career in the army, so they brought you up as their own, and you have been the thorn in my side ever since. I had stopped struggling, and so he let my arms go, then walked back to the sideboard and poured 2 large glasses of brandy from a decanter. When he handed it to me, I drank it down in 2 large gulps. Father wasn't my real father? We stood in silence for a time, the dust settling on our wounds. What was her name? Who? The woman, my mother. How the devil should I know? It's over 40 years ago. Celine or some such? Or was it Chantal? I threw the crystal glass at him, but it hit the sideboard and shattered. You really are despicable. You have no feelings for anyone but yourself. You locked me up in that place for all those years. Did Dr. Lynch know that you were my father? My God, it all makes sense now. I did you a favor. I could see you were heading the same way as your mother, getting pregnant without a ring on your finger. So I got rid of it for you. And what thanks do I get? I was so angry and overwhelmed that it took several moments before I could process what he was saying. How did you know I would lose the baby? What's that? The baby. She was stillborn. You said you got rid of her, but there's no way you could have known that would happen. He poured himself another drink. Lyndon, what have you done? I should have put her in a bag and drowned her like the unwanted kitten she was. I felt a rage inside of me that almost blinded my sight. I dug my nails into my palms of my hands. I wanted to kill him. What in God's name are you talking about? I said in a low voice I hardly recognized as my own. But she was worth more to me alive. A boy would of course have earned more, but as it was, she made a tidy sum. He looked up at me and smiled, laughed at my ignorance, just as he had when we were children, and I, the younger sibling, always slower on the uptake. You had no idea, did you? He took a swig of his drink, looking victorious. Good old Patty kept that secret to himself. I grabbed the knife off the dresser and lunged for him. God help me, Lyndon, if you don't tell me the truth right now, I will carve your eyes out. Steady, old girl, you could injure someone with that. He casually sat back in his carver chair. I sold her to a couple who were desperate for a child. Lynch arranged the whole thing. Done it before, apparently. She's alive? I could hardly breathe and leaned on the back of one of the dining chairs for support. He made no reply. Something was not playing out as he had predicted. You sound relieved. God, you really have no clue, do you? About what? About what it means to love. I studied myself for a moment, then realized the extent of his inhumanity. You sold your own granddaughter. I threw Mr. Turner's copy of the article on the table, then turned to leave. Aren't you going to ask me where she is? Would you tell me if I did? He smirked to himself. You know me well, little Opal. The term unsettled me. Only Armand had called me that. After tomorrow, everyone will know you for exactly what you are. I walked out of the room and somehow kept myself upright. I passed the housekeeper in the hall, who gave me a queer look. I was lost in an endless maze of emotions and memories that no longer seemed to fit anywhere. My daughter was alive. That was all I needed to hold on to. On reaching the front door, I heard the loud report of a gunshot. I halted. Then I heard a woman scream. I didn't turn back. I commanded my feet to move, one in front of the other, until I was out in the street, taking the air into my lungs. I knew I had a choice. I could let this awful series of events become my new story, a story I would be condemned to carry with me for eternity, or I could let it die with him. It was a choice I would have to make every day for the rest of my life. Wow. Okay. 385. Okay. Chapter 53, Martha. It had grown dark. I felt safe in our little cocoon. It felt like such a relief letting Henry in, sharing all the things I no longer wanted to carry on my own. We knew that we had both been drawn here for a reason, something special that gave a shimmering magic to every kiss, every caress. I could hardly believe that he was mine, that those eyes were for me only. He whispered silly things into my neck, searched my skin with his fingers, and, most sweetly of all, fell asleep in my arms. Madame Bowden had not returned, and with some strange prescience, I no longer expected her to. Call it intuition, but I guess that she had always known more about this building than she had let on. She knew more about me also. Who was she? What had she been testing me for? Had her friends from the dinner party been in on it? Was it all some sort of act? I did not have all the pieces yet, but I could no longer delude myself that my arrival in Hoppenny Lane was purely happenstance. I became aware of something else, something wonderful. I could read Henry again. His stories were as clear to me now as the day we met, even in his sleep. I was reading the reunion he'd had with his father, and despite the complicated emotions, how much it had meant to him. Maybe it wasn't love that blocked my ability at all. Maybe it was the opposite of love, for myself. To stay with Shane in spite of how he treated me, I'd had to abandon myself in some way. Silence the inner voice that knew something was wrong. Ignore the gut feeling that told me I did not deserve this. That my life held so much more potential than becoming someone else's punching bag. I lost my gift of reading Shane when I grew blind to myself and my own needs. Equally, I lost my gift with Henry when I refused to see how much I loved him, how much I needed him. I felt him stirring beside me, his hair slightly damp against his forehead, smelled of paper in an autumn breeze. I carefully snuck out of bed, trying not to wake him, and slipped upstairs to retrieve my book from the hall table. I sat in one of Madame Bowden's Queen Anne chairs and read the last few pages. Lost is not a hopeless place to be. It is a place of patience, of waiting. Lost does not mean gone forever. Lost is a bridge between worlds, where the pain of your past can be transformed into power. You have always held the key to this special place, but now you are ready to unlock the door. Each person who finds themselves here brings a special gift that if you use it, you can transcend your fears. A story handed down through memory, lives that reveal themselves to you without words, books that breathe their knowledge softly in your ear, mechanical toys that spring to life under kind hands, nostalgia rescued and reborn into a new life. All of these things are the real magic within these walls. There is an energy here that can transform into anything it wants. It has remained hidden from all except the true believers, a tiny seed that still contains all that it once was and can be again. Are you ready to cross the threshold and claim your birthright? My body felt steady and grounded like a tree with deep roots, while my mind was light and flowing in the breeze. This was my journey. While I never would have chosen what happened with Shane, it had led me here in my search for something better. Opaline was right. I felt powerful. Not in an egotistical way, but in a calm, knowing sort of way, like I was finally ready to take ownership of my life. Then I remembered something Henry had said, or rather had held back. My instincts told me that it was significant. I was ready to know the full truth. What was it that you came to tell me? I asked, sitting on the bed beside him. He stretched and yawned. What? When you came here today, you said you'd found something? He rested on his elbow and blinked a few times like a computer restarting. Oh yes, hang on. He swung his legs out of bed and pulled on his boxers before grabbing his jacket from upstairs. I felt chilled the instant he left and smiled to myself. It's okay, I whispered. I had to reassure myself that it was safe to have these feelings. It would not be easy learning to trust him. I was only starting to trust myself. Opaline's baby, he said, bursting back into the flat. She didn't die at all. They just told her that. He sat on the end of the bed and handed me the time-worn certificate. It was an unofficial adoption record for a baby girl. Her name was recorded as Rose. My God, how could they do that to her? Money, I imagine. It was quite common at the time. Henry squeezed my hand and I felt so glad that he was there. I couldn't face this alone. My eyes are playing tricks. Can you read out the name of the couple? What the name of the couple is? Chloe. Am I pronouncing that right? My teeth began chattering from the cold. Hey, what's up? He asked, pulling me close and putting his arms around me. My grandmother was adopted by a couple called the Chloe's. Wow. And we will read the last part tomorrow. So we left off on chapter 54, page 389. It's the happy. The happy is coming forward. It does give you chills because I feel like it brings healing to everyone that has ever been, well, as a human being, you go through trauma, but this book is probably one of my favorites. It took a while to understand it, and maybe not until the last page am I fully going to, but it's worth reading it to the end to get to that. But thank you guys for being here, and we will finish it tomorrow.